And we have the audacity to look at him and wonder why. When thousands of times he watched vivid depictions of human suffering and derived pleasure and reinforcement for it. We taught him to kill, and we taught him to like it.
Flags and belted the national anthem.
The feeling out here is euphoric as thousands of Americans gather in front of the White House where just hours ago, U.S. President Barack Obama made the announcement that Osama bin Laden is dead. Our guns would be able to stand up against the U.S. military.
Yeah, we would.
You'd be surprised. Let's take one example.
Right.
You guys might remember the Hong Kong protests a couple years ago. If they would have had firearms, it would have been a completely different situation. The Chinese Communist Party wouldn't have taken over Hong Kong if every one of them had an AR-15 strapped around their back. The number one way you look in the 20th century that the worst countries are able to take power, Nazi Germany, Soviet Union, Pol Pot, Mao's China, the first thing they did is they took the guns.
Cool parents, really. Quentin, would you say this movie teaches girls to be empowered by being violent and vicious, just like boys?
Every week, the Home Guard holds trainings across the state.
Today we're going over room clearing.
Today, they're practicing building infiltration exercises that they imagine could be used in a hostage rescue.
Consider taking out a life insurance policy on Homer, because I'm sure you know that young black boys on the South Side are more than likely to be shot and or killed, and so the
government. The police carry weapons. Weapons were invented to defend oneself. So it is only common sense that we carry weapons to defend ourselves.
And yes.
America will predispose you because you're searching after a role model and you get these violent role models being given you. But
Apparently we are back again, and today we'll be building on the Christian nation that was obsessed with violence, right? Which is America, right? My home country, America. This great country, right? This great country that we live in that affords me the right to even make videos like this criticizing my nation that my father fought for, right? So with the pros comes the cons, right? Our freedoms in America are also sometimes our downfalls, right? And today we'll be dealing with the violence that is baked into America's crust, right? Starting with the Catholic Pope, right? The Catholic Pope and America's first cardinal sin, which came under the Papal Bull of 1492 and the Doctrine of Discovery given by the Catholic Pope, right? Which sent Christopher Columbus and these killer conquistadors to what they call the New World, right? The New World. For us, many of us were already here, but that's another story for another time. However, from the moment that America, right, these conquistadors get to this land, they bring violence on the Taino and the Arawak and the other native tribes, right, on the island of Hispaniola. And from then it's on, right? Later on, the Pilgrims bring violence. Later on, you get the slave trade, right? Enslaving natives on the land, and later bringing Africans from West Africa and even shifting some natives to to Western Africa, later on to Europe, right? Because this slave trade was a big thing. But we're not going to deal with the slave trade too much. However, this is America's cardinal sin, right? Capitalism, Christianity, nationalism, right? These three things brought violence, right? Free labor, enslaving humans, brutalizing humans for capital, right? this is what got America rich. Sugar plantations, cotton plantations, right? Right? So this is in America's crust. This is in America's crust. And just like building a home, you have to have your foundation you can never get away from. That's your bottom layer. And America can never get away from its violent foundation, which is violence, right? Violence. Now, in modern day America, today, this is a unique country because America has more guns than it does people. So what America has done is militarized its citizens. America's citizens are militarized, right? You have many citizens that were in the military, right? And learned gun training. This is how the Panthers were so strong, as you've seen in films such as Dead Presidents, right? They had gun training that they learned in the military, brought it back, taught some of the neighborhood, right? And so you have in America, you have many people walking around with all kind of gun training that were in the military and some not in the military, right? And then you got kids just with access to high power weapons, right? And then now in today's time, you have many cities, many states where you can open carry without even a gun license or any gun training, right? So again, this is a unique country in the sense that you have more guns than people, right? And Americans think that every country allows them this right. This is a rare right, and it's in our Second Amendment. And the Second Amendment is vital because the Second Amendment gives you some, I would say, false sense of hope that, you know, if the government ever tried to overtake you, you can at least have a chance to fight back. When we look at some of these wars, and you know, however you feel about that is however you feel about that, right? But when we look at some of these wars, like what's going on in Palestine, of course they don't have the weapons, but we are seeing that in today's, today's wars, we're seeing more fights with the drones, this technology that Americans don't have access to yet, right? So, anyway, you know, that's why when you seen COVID, many people were, because conspiracy has also plagued the minds of many Americans, right? So now you're dealing with a militarized group that has a lot of access to guns, too much time on their hands, can join militias when they're not at work, and they have access to all kind of books, right? And now in the social media age, you have access to people like Nick Fuentes. You have access to people like Alex Jones, and people that push racial ideologies, right, to make money, but create division. And with that setting, right, then you end up getting shootouts, racial shootings like you see in El Paso, racial shootings like we seen in Buffalo, racial shootings like the one in Florida, racial shootings like Charleston, South Carolina with Dylan Roof, right? And you have so many mass shootings, right, and school shootings, because these people see that these schools are soft targets now. And so you now have a country full of people that grew up watching violence, right? Grew up watching violence in the cartoons. It's in the music. It's everywhere you look. You know, my dad's era, the Western was violent. You know, the war film, the horror film. Horror is big now. Violence, right? Little kids go to the go to the gun range at young ages and learn how to shoot in America, right? Before their brains are even fully developed, right? Having access to high power weapons that can blow you away. That can blow you away. Now, the Black Panthers were also strong uh, because of the Second Amendment, right? That's why you were able to see them even at that time with so much uh, racial tension around them, still be able to carry their weapons, right? Still be able to carry their weapons. They feel like this was something that they needed to have some sort of, dog in the fight. It's the same way that many Americans feel now, and that's why the Second Amendment is so sacred to many Americans, right? They don't trust the government because of the conspiracies that, as you got, America's leadership has not always been honest with the American people. Sometimes because the people can't handle it, and sometimes because there's just corruption. So with that being said, as Americans get access to books and technology and social media that takes them to places and people learn things, they get more and more distrust for the American leadership. That's why you hear the news is fake and this is fake and that's fake, and they go down these rabbit holes of conspiracy. That's why Alex Jones is so big now. He's bigger than he even was back then. After COVID, the conspiracy theorists blew up, right? Racial ideology blew up, right? And more violence took place as you got more and more distrust between and with the Republicans and the Democrats being more and more at odds, right? Everything gets politicized now, so we're living in a violent climate, right? So white Christian nationalist organizations historically always cause fear with the gun, violence, right? Violence on soft targets, black churches, right? Kidnapping innocent people, right? Lynchings. This is America's identity, right? Whether no matter how far we want to get away from it. America is also filled with local gangs and thugs and criminals in each city that also have access to these militarized weapons, and they will use them, and they do use them nightly all across the country, right? This is the reality. This is normalized to us. This is how we grew up. In certain neighborhoods we grew up in, the guns was going off. 4th of July was letting off. Days it wasn't 4th of July, niggas was letting off. We think it's normal to have 18, 19 friends dead from gun violence. We think that's normal, But when I would go to the suburbs with my father, and I would meet some of the kids who had been more sheltered, right? Because in America you have a class system. So when I was with my father, I was able to be amongst some suburban kids, and I was able to find out that it actually wasn't normal that a lot of these kids never had friends that were gunned down as teenagers, shot as teenagers, beat up and stomped as teenagers, gang, you know what I mean? This was something that was going on in the inner city, right? But now it's spreading even to the suburbs. They even getting more violence as we start to see the video game usage, in the social media. You see all these young kids with Nick Fuentes and all this, and they're creating little race soldiers, right? That are violent, that want violence and want division and want confrontation. You see those kids going to HBCUs. That's not to really have a debate. That's to antagonize and cause division, right? Little 14-year-olds like Nick Fuentes, when he was 14, listening to politics, racial politics, like Charlie Kirk said he was listening to Rush Limbaugh at 13. This type of stuff. this type of climate of we hate the Republicans, we hate the Democrats, we just hate in a climate full of guns, right? And even when shooting happens, neither side wants to, neither side really wants to put their feelings put their differences to the side for the kids, right? The violence continues. America's number one game is football. Football is a very, very violent sport where you watch poor people, rich owners, sit in the balcony, right, and watch athletes from impoverished communities in America run into each other, get super strong and run into each other and crack their heads at each other all day for some money and some entertainment, right? For some money and some entertainment, knowing that each play is a minor concussion. And when you do this for 10, 12 years, when most of these players get done with their career, you see that many of them end up dying violently, taking their own selves out. Domestic violence, crimes, and it's dealing with the trauma that's coming from this sport that wears down on your brain, right? It wears down on your brain, all for a sport, right? So, but it's our sport, and it's not even very popular in other countries, right? But in this violent country, Americans love their football, and they prefer to watch it on Sunday as the pros, right after church, right? It's almost like a ceremonial type of thing, right? After church, gather together for violence, right? Thanksgiving, we celebrate violence, right? What the Pilgrims did to the natives, we celebrating violence. It's a victory, in their eyes, but it's violence. You know what I mean? You call it Thanksgiving. I call your holiday Hell Day because I'm from poverty neglected by the wealthy. Nah, I don't know about that anyway, man. Boxing is another sport, right, that Americans love. I love boxing, right, but I'm American. What can I say? It's a very brutal sport where many boxers, again, from poverty, right, throw punches at each other's head all day. More trauma to the brain, right? When most of these boxers get done, they don't end up like Floyd. They end up like Ali. They end up like Mosley. Mosley can barely talk now. He can't. He's not right. Roy Jones got a little bit of a stutter now. That's trauma to the brain. And what happens to the brain, it can't heal. It can't come back. That trauma don't come back. The damage is done, right? Americans love their MMA. Another very, very violent sport. The president comes into the Coliseum, Rome, and this is the modern Rome, right? And it watches these gladiators fight in an underpaid professional sport and try to kill each other, right? Very, very brutal sport. But America loves it, right? And even many American leaders have been victims of violence, right? From JFK to Malcolm to Lincoln, MLK, right? This is our history. Again, I said the westerns, American cinema, John Wick #10. I'm being sarcastic, right? Rambo 7. I heard Sylvester Stallone wants to do another Rambo where he uses CGI to make himself younger, right? The Goodfellas, we love the Godfather, we love the violence. Tarantino, I love Tarantino. This is violence. American cinema is violence. The horror film, which has been doing great in the cinema, horror films have been killing it this year. Violence, right? This is what in some of these films, violence happens to kids in these films. And it's just like, wow, okay, it was just a movie, right? And we say it's just a movie, but if you black and you watch Roots, when something happened to Big Mama and she get lynched and burnt up in that film, You can't tell me you don't feel that. So it's not just a movie, right? These these things have real effects on the subconscious mind. I have given you plenty books on the subconscious mind, right? So again, this is more violence to your diet, to your psyche, right? In America, little kids and teenagers can't even go to school without becoming victims of violence. As many crazy Americans with gun access see schools as soft targets and even shoot up these schools. We got little kids doing drills for when shootings happens at these schools. I got a 4-year-old, right? I got a 4-year-old, yo. So this shit start to hit home as your daughter get, ready to go to school. Right? For those that got kids, you feel me? For those that got kids older than me, you been going through it. And this is a sad reality because I went to a hood school as an elementary, but I feel safe. We didn't have to worrying if somebody was gonna come in and shoot up the school. But now this is the reality that these kids have to live with. I almost, I got feelings watching the little kids do drills, shooting drills. Right? If some mad maniac come in and shoot up the school because America has a problem with its violence and it's militarized, right? It's militarized citizens with access to weapons. I'm not saying that they should take away the weapons. I don't know what they should do, but all I know is that some ain't right. But we can't get away from this foundation of violence in America, right? In America, as rappers that come from violent communities and turn to rap to make money, they begin to promote and speak on the violence that they seen in our communities since kids, right? Again, our American diet is violence, right? Again, I told you I have many friends who was gunned down. I've been a victim of violence, right? I've done violence to other people, right? This is how we grow up. We think this is what makes you a man in many of these communities, right? So, again, this is the diet. American kids grow up and are introduced to playing hours and hours and hours of violent video games, right? I remember when Grand Theft Auto nigga used to just I'm about to go shoot all these pedestrians. We knew it was a game. You know what I mean? We knew it was a game. However, everybody can't handle that. Some people taking that stuff and some people, the mind ain't right. The mind ain't right. Some people's minds ain't right. It's not prepared for this type of stuff when they get access to it. Now, in America, no place is safe. Mass shootings take place everywhere, in churches, at Walmarts, at dollar stores. Nowhere is safe. Nowhere. Churches, man. You know what I mean? Dylan Roof shot the church up. So if the nigga shot the church, ain't nowhere safe. He shot the Walmart up. Growing up, niggas used to just shoot up the club and all the street stuff. That was crazy too. We normalized that too. We used to say things like, "Oh man, the mass shootings is that's something white people do," but we didn't even really think about how many niggas get shot up at the club every weekend. How many innocent sisters get shot at the club every weekend? Right? We got mass shooters in our community too. Right? So I'm glad that's being recognized. Right? Podcast personalities that are advocates for guns. Right? They can't even have public debates, right, without getting shot. We just seen what happened with Charlie Kirk, right? He was a big Second Amendment advocate, right? And then he became a victim of the thing he was an advocate for. Because America's diet is violence, right? America's cardinal sin, again, was violence. You can't get away from it. Right? Done by people who claim to be Christians. White Christian nationalists, I want you to study them. They are not regular white Christians. You got white Christians, and then you got white Christian nationalists, and it's a total different thing. right? It's a totally different thing. Now, America has even went to war with its own self to continue a history of violence. I'm talking the Civil War, right? Many, people still flying Confederate flags in South Carolina and other places, right? Still obsessed with this war that they lost, right? But when the parties can't coexist, you know, the radicals turn to war, and this was a very, very bloody war. But the North won, and now it's looking like we headed back towards that direction again. I hope not, but you never know, right? America's military still rules the world with guns, right? The gun power is how America is able to owe niggas so much money, right? They say we in debt, you in debt. Yeah, but who got the gun though? Who got the bigger gun? Who got the technology? Who's supplying Israel? You know what I mean? Now I'll tell you this: Russia and China testing America's nuts, right? They testing America's nuts. They want to see if America is still like that, if we still got that military might, right? And they're really like, um, you know, pushing this. Putin is pushing it just to see, because they looking at America like y'all ain't really fought nobody in a long time. Y'all ain't really fought nobody that was really worth something in a long time. And Vietnam gave y'all some shit, because America took over after, World War II. Germany crashed, right? The Nazi party crashed, right? And then Japan crashed, right? And then the Soviet Union fell, and then America dominated ever since, right? And now Putin is trying to test that military might again to see where niggas is at with it. Is y'all niggas still like that? I don't know. I'm gonna keep trying Trump to see what he gonna do, and that's what we getting, right? So America also has more gun militia clubs than any other country, and every race in America has a militia, right? These are gun clubs full of gun enthusiasts who are military trained, right? Nigga could be working at Target, but when he get off work, nigga bust that hammer like a pro. So this is the reality also. As kids, Americans watched violent cartoons, right? Violent cartoons. Watching Tom and Jerry hit each other with the hammer, running, Daffy Duck, getting his beat shot off, right? This is all violent that we seen, violence, right? So, Halloween is coming next month. Little kids gonna be dressed up in violence, dressed up as child's play. It's a traditional thing, but I'm just pointing out our history of normalizing violence, right? Horror is one of my favorite genres, but it's violence. And what does this do to the subconscious mind when you give a people violence everywhere you look? What do you get? You get a violent society. In rap, everybody loved the gun bar. Battle rap ain't nothing but the gun bar. Hypothetically, how many ways can I kill this nigga that I'm rapping against? Right? I'll blow your head off with and the crowd goes crazy. This is violent. This is our reality, right? In America, young black kids die by bullets, young black boys specifically, by bullets now more than car accidents, right? This is how bad it's getting. Many young black girls are becoming victim. Black kids are becoming victim. This is reality. Domestic violence is crazy in America. America has a violence problem. America loves war. It's a war machine, right? You see Trump say, we ain't going to do the Department of Defense. We going to call it the Department of War. This is a war machine, And we are raising our babies in a war machine. And we don't realize it, but it's in the media. It's in our neighborhoods. These are violent. You say, well, black community was violent when I grew up in it. That's true. But when I listen to the elders, they say in the 60s, it wasn't like that. Right? So it wasn't always like that. But what did Dr. King say? We inherited his people into a burning house. And the house is burning. Rome is seeming to begin to fall as both sides of the party, our parties, Democrat and Republican, seem to hate each other guts and can't get along about nothing. Right? We are hinting at maybe a second civil war. I'm not trying to put fear into you. I'm just telling you what we are maybe looking at. Right? Because it's getting that bad. I did a thread on it last year, right before the Civil War film dropped. But this is how bad it's getting. When the parties can't agree on nothing. That was the first Civil War. Hey, y'all get rid of y'all slaves. Now we bringing industrial. Now we ain't doing that. Now we ain't doing that. All right, the fuck it then, nigga. We grab up. We gonna go to war then. And that's how it's getting with Trump. We don't like Trump. Trump don't like this. We don't like that. Let's do it then. Trump said at Charlie Kirk's funeral, I hate my opponents. He said, I hate my opponents. He said he wants to have a war within. And if you look at him, you know, he hasn't been doing nothing but coming at the Democrats, Democratic cities, Democratic mayors. This is a war being waged on America. You know, we may be looking at the start of a second civil war if we don't get this shit right. And for all of us with children and, you know what I mean, we have to understand that we are raising our kids in a violent society. Right? When you study the blacks in Vietnam died more than any other group. Did you know that? The first to go and the first to die. Right? So, you know, this is reality. But they used to call it in Vietnam, the brothers used to call the white man during the Vietnam War the beast in the 70s. They said, we up against the beast. And you know what they're really talking about is this is the society that Dr. King inherited us into. I love this country. My father fought for this country. You know, I'm native to this country. You know what I mean? What them niggas talking about? I'm native to this country. You know what I mean? So I love this country. We built this country and we ain't going nowhere. But the reality is we been up against the beast for a long time. We up against a machine, a war machine. Wouldn't even let niggas drink water. Wouldn't let niggas go get a pie. Well, you know what I mean? Wouldn't let niggas get educated. We up against the beast, and racism is coming back at a higher level than ever. Right? And what do? We have to be prepared, and you know, sometimes I look at the black community. Not us, because all of us is y'all follow me, y'all gonna always be tapped in. If I'm tapped in, you watching me, we gonna stay tapped in, right? But the reality is that a lot of people in our community are so caught up in the entertainment. We're not the only community, but we so caught up in the entertainment that we don't even see what's going on. So when we see those kids walk onto that HBCU campus, right? Maybe that would be an opener to let you know that a lot of these young kids, these Charlie Kirk fans, these Nick Fuentes fans, these are kids, right? The young white kids, young white boys being brainwashed. Hours and hours of listening to racists. Hours and hours of listening to sexist, misogynistic, you know, believing that this country is theirs and theirs only. Right? It's time to get serious. If you got kids, you gotta be preparing your kids. It's child abuse to send your kids out into that world not ready. Not to put no knowledge in their head. That's child abuse. That's child abuse to not let your kids know what they up against. That's the real child abuse. Right? So, you know, as you send your kids into them schools to get brainwashed by teachers that may not love them, Send your kids to daycare. Hope the teacher may care. Right? Y'all know the song. So we gotta really, really lock in on this and see what's going on. Our kids are raised in a violent world. You gotta teach your kids. They say Nipsey used to say, "Stay dangerous," and then he became a victim of the violence. Right? This is a violent society. I know. I've been new. Right? But we in a machine, and we can't get out of it. Right? You are inside of the war machine, right? And by you being inside of the war machine for so long, you become a mini war machine, right? You're violent also. You're violent like the country that produced you, right? You're produced like a factory on the assembly line. You violent. Been watching violent your whole life, right? I just watched leaders at the United Nations walk out on Benjamin Netanyahu as he began to speak, right? So, Americans say the rest of the world is this. They try to scare you about so much about the rest of the world, teach you to be this xenophobic, type of human being, right? When in reality, we are the country that's, funding Benjamin Netanyahu, right? America in Israel, bombing Gaza, talking about taking the strip, putting a beach on it in a resort, moving people out, ethnically cleansing, getting rid of, trying to pull another group out of the human family, right? This is what we're dealing with, and we got people in our country that still support that, and they go to church. And then they say, yeah, drop a bomb on the kid. This is the reality. And they don't see the harm in that. They don't see the wrong in that because they're caught up in, well, we won the war. You see, you're bloodthirsty. The bloodthirsty American, right? The bloodthirsty American, right? Capitalism breeds it. Competition. Right, by any means, this is the reality we living with. I also just seen the kid that shot up the NFL headquarters. He was a high school football player. They had an interview with him after the game, right? That kid right there, a young black dude, I think it looked like maybe black, and he mixed with something that looks like, anyway, walked into the NFL headquarters a couple months back and shot it up. The autopsy came back. He had CTE, right? Where'd he get it from? Playing football. And he didn't even go to the NFL. So we know that these concussions, in this mind-altering game that's played to even children go out there and get trained to run into each other, clash and collide, right? Clash helmets at each other, head trauma. This kid didn't even play professional football, and the CTE was there, and it made him hyper violent, right? So how many kids play football didn't even make it to? Only so many players gonna make it to the NFL. How many just walking around here with CTE from playing football since they was kids? Pop Warner, right? Violence. This is the reality, right? Spankings. We got to talk about spankings, especially in the black community, right? Many of the spanking style, the belt to ass, we like to say BTA, belt to ass, right? We got a lot of them violent spankings coming up. You don't teach kids how to not be violent by using violence on them. This is the way that the slave master beat you. Violence, right? Sit back over there, and let me whip you. I'm gonna whip you, right? And then you got a scripture for it to make the excuse for your violence, right? You want to put that on the Bible, on the Quran, whatever. But you just violent, and it's bred into you. Your great grandma did that, and her great grandma did it, and her great grandma did it, and then farther back, you was a slave getting whipped. And that's where you learned it from. And you kept it going and passing it down. Many black kids get beaten with belts, switches off trees. Y'all think that shit is normal? Niggas used to be like, yeah, bro, we get together and be like, yeah, bro, my mama had the electric cord. No, nigga, my mama had the switch. Remember, my mama had the belt. She used to name the belt Big Bruiser. That's a true story. My mama had the belt called Big Bruiser. Right? I threw that shit away. I'm sharing a valuable story with y'all, life story. You know, we used to get our ass with all kind of shit. Brooms. Nigga get hit with the broom. Bah. You know, nigga get hit with a spatula. Abuse. Violence. And we, you know, kids love mama so much. Kids love daddy so much that they accept it until they don't. Right? But that makes you violent. That's why we so angry. Right? My first rap song, when I first started rapping, like, not when I first started rapping, because I started rapping hella young, but like 13, 14, it was violent, especially like 16, 17, 18, it was violence in them raps when I look back at it before I got the knowledge itself. And we say, where all that violence come from? Because it came from the community and all that, but man, it come from a violent household, right? A household where if this ain't clean, you getting hit. No conflict resolution, no sitting down trying to solve something. You know, just, oh, bro, why you didn't pop? Right? It's on site. So when we all growing up like this, we think our parents think this is the way to do it. I got another one I'm going to build on spanking, so I won't go too deep into this. But this is slavery style of spanking, beating your kids into submission. These are humans that we dealing with. Right? That's not your child. It's your child, but that child belongs to the village. That child belongs to the village. Right? And if you beat that child, you can go to jail. If it was yours, you wouldn't go to jail. Right? If it was yours, you wouldn't go to jail. And the fact that you think that you are above that child, right? Not in a guardian way, but in the way of superiority, I can just beat you. Right? With violence. You don't teach a kid not to be violent by being violent to the kid. This is basic information, right? But it has to be addressed, because those kids go on to keep the violence going too. Those people go into domestic violence. We our community suffers from conflict resolution skills. Niggas will kill you over a argument. Right? Domestic violence turns into everybody got to get no conflict resolution skills. It's just escalating to violence. Because plenty of us come from violent households. But mom and them thought that was the way to do it. But it wasn't. Right? It wasn't. So with all this stuff going on, man, again, we are in the war machine. Right? So now you see what happens when a society is fed violence, right? In the media, in the music, and sports, all that, right? Since a child. Household, since a child. What do you get? You get a violent society. And that's what America has. A violent society that loves violence. Right? And it loves violence so much that it's not willing to, make adjustments to stop the violence. Right? Can't stop. It continues. So it's what we're dealing with, right? It's what we're living in. That will cover our subject for today. If you stayed this long, I really, really appreciate you, and I hope that you are enjoying the channel. I've been at this for 7 months, and I must say that, I'm starting to really enjoy the channel. I'm starting to really enjoy giving you, these type of builds. We started on Twitter. and we got up to about 35K. Should be at 100K, but y'all know how the algorithm works when you speak truth to power, right? So we had some hurdles along the way, but I'm glad that we are building the way we can build now, right? So if you enjoyed this build, I want you to do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe if you're not subscribed. Share the video, you know what I'm saying? Each one teach one, help get the word out. If something helped you, don't be the nigga that learns something and then hold it to yourself, right? Pass the jewel. That's why I constantly, give books in my threads, books on my Twitter, books on my posts, because I want you to know that, I'm not just trying to, like act like, I'm not a student myself. So I'm trying to give you game to where I got some of this stuff from too. So you can also push the message, you know what I mean? And on that note, family, we are out. But before we bounce one more time, we have to say RIP to the Queen, Assata Shakur, who transitioned herself today, right? She made her transition today, and now she's an ancestor. The elder is now an ancestor, right? And as the master teacher used to say, we are going to be the ancestors next, right? So, Assata, she was able to flee the country, fighting the case. She was so beloved in the community, that the Panthers broke her out of prison, right? And since the Panthers was locked in with Cuba and Castro at the time, right, she was able to flee to Cuba. Many people that do not like Obama, in the black community, they put some blame on him for, allegedly doubling the bounty on Assata Shakur. But I want to fact check that real fast in Obama's defense, right? Because you have to understand how this thing works, right? When Obama became president, it was a lot of people didn't like that. It's part of the reason why we are in the situation that we are in today, right? With the climate, right? Now, when Obama got in, Obama was trying to mend the relationship between America and Cuba, right? He was trying to mend that relationship. That relationship had not been right since Fidel Castro came into power, and many people know that he kicked many Americans that were capitalistic and preying on Cuba for opportunity. He exiled them out of Cuba. You see some of that in Godfather too, right? And but one thing that was prevalent was that Cuba Fidel Castro had a pretty good relationship with some of the Black Panthers. As I always tell you, that the Black Panthers were communists, and they used to walk around with the Chairman Mao books, right? And that's why you see Malcolm X with Fidel Castro. They met at a hotel, and you see, many of the Panthers, were connected to Fidel Castro in Cuba, right? And when Assata caught this case, she was able to flee to Cuba, right? So that relationship has not been right ever since. So Obama was coming in trying to mend that relationship, right? And while he was doing that, it was a perfect time for the governor of New Jersey, because it was a police officer that was killed, and they were putting the blame on Assata Shakur, right? And she didn't do it, right? But the blame was falling on her. And, New Jersey cops, the police in any state, if they lose a cop, they're never gonna forget that. You know what I mean? So especially like the Panthers and the cops were at war with each other. This was real stuff. You know what I'm saying? And that's why Tupac was such a threat when he got the power. When people found out who he was after he shot the cops, they was like, "Oh, this is Shakur. This ain't just Tupac. This Tupac Shakur, who's connected to Mutulu Shakur, who's connected to Asada Shakur, who's connected to Afeni Shakur, right? Who's connected to Geronimo Pratt. This a dangerous dude, and he's a rapper, and he's famous, and he's got a song. Tupac had a song about shooting the cops, and a black dude in Houston listened and did it. You see what I'm saying? So when they seen him shoot cops, and they say, yo, this dude is dangerous, and he's connected to black militants who actually carry out, who got smoke with the FBI. And if you think that they didn't have nothing to do with Tupac's downfall, you seriously mistaken and underestimating, right? When they found out he was connected to Asada and all these political prisoners, and he still had contact with them, that's where the Thug Life Code of Ethics come from, him and Mutulu Shakur, right? They really locked in on Pac. They really, really locked in on Pac because this family had a history of going to war with the police, and Tupac was the rapper that had the way Young Thug got all the young kids now on lock. That's how Tupac had all the niggas. But imagine if Young Thug was on some black conscious, black militant power shit. That's not as dangerous. As long as he rapping about busting heads and busting hammers and all that, it's all good. But the moment he start getting that platform, that power to tell them young niggas in that crowd to do this and do that and bust back if he do this like that, you know what I'm saying? Now it's a danger. Now he become a threat. They can't have that. One of the things in the COINTELPRO was that what was his name? J. Edgar Hoover said that we'll never let a black messiah rise. And Tupac became that black messiah figure through rap music. When the label signed him, they had no idea his ties to that of who he was. And when you give that man that much type of power, and he got the young kids on lock because he doing the thug thing too, and the girls love him, this nigga's too powerful. And he's conscious. He was too powerful. He was like the Jesus type of figure. Not to make this too much about Pac, but this is Pac's the Asada Shakur who passed away today, who transitioned. This is his step aunt. This is his godmom. Right? Now, so the point I was making was that Chris Christie, because that a cop died in New Jersey, Chris Christie, the governor at the time, who was super pro police, super Blue Lives Matter now, was pushing Obama. Hey yo, you trying to mend that relationship with Cuba? No. You need to get Asada Shakur extradited back to America. Bring her back to New Jersey so we can lock her up. Bring her back. And he kept pressuring Obama's FBI. And the FBI did that. The FBI put doubled the bounty on her. But Cuba stayed strong and said no. You expecting, niggas hate Obama, so they turn around and say, you up against what you see what we up against now with the MAGA shit. You think Obama could just go in there and be like, nah man, I'm gonna work with Asada? No. He tried to mend that relationship, and the FBI did what they was gonna do. They was gonna do that anyway. When Obama left the office, Trump asked for her personally. Tell Cuba to bring her back. And then Chris Christie kept asking every president, Biden, bring her back. You see what I'm saying? So while y'all trying to put this on Obama, it's not right. Obama was trying to mend that relationship with Cuba. Right? Cuba have a long history of supporting, under Fidel Castro, of supporting black Americans. That's why Obama was trying to help that. America was using Obama a little bit to help mend their relationships with Africa, with Cuba, and other black nations. Right? And yes, Cuba have many blacks. Right? For those that don't know. But yes, our great elder passed today. But she got to live out her the rest of her years without having to return to America. Right? You know, let's keep it real. If Obama really wanted her, he would have made it a big thing. They could just go get her if they really want to. They wouldn't have got to Bin Laden. So this was the thing that Chris Christie wanted, and he was trying to pressure Obama into it hard because, you know, he was the first black man. And he was trying to, you trying to mend that? Nah, get that right first. And the FBI did that. Fact check me. Did that come from Obama or did that come from the FBI while Obama was in office? You know, but we're not here for that. You know, we want to say R.I.P. to Afeni Shakur, R.I.P. to Tupac Shakur, R.I.P. to Mutulu Shakur, and R.I.P. to the beautiful elder, now turned ancestor, Assata Shakur. On that note, family, we are out. Peace.
I think that much more needs to be known out here in the world about what is going on in the United States, because the United States government always projects this image throughout the world that it is a champion of human rights. And the reality of that situation is that the United States is the biggest violator of human rights, not only in the United States, but all over the world.
Damn, Assata fleet, they broke her out of prison, now she's free. Overseas, but they hit her out, and never leave. They had a nephew, became an MC. He blasted 2 cops, they named the Tupac. I grabbed the 40s out the shoebox to pay him homage. We speaking code, it's called Ebonics. They took our native tongue, it was the way that we responded. Natural inventors, they gave us scrap and we made dinners. All for this love, but every time hitting the tenders, fought in all the wars. Raising their kids and cleaning floors down. Picking cotton with blood on it from cussing sores. And this country's yours, burn down the stores that we ain't known. In the house, nigga, look from his mansion and said they wrong. Easy field boots.
Distinguished, we have to go back to what young brother here referred to as the house Negro and the field Negro. Back during slavery, there was 2 kinds of slaves. There was the house Negro and the field Negro. The house Negro, they lived in the house with master. They dressed